authorization, approval, and award of a service contract to a respondent in which he or she is beneficially interested.
What do you mean
Right.
From their proposed
The draft.
RFP. Now, that's a statement addressed at the members of the mayor and council. Why does a town RFP for website design have to have an affirmative statement they've been telling the mayor and council what to do?
I don't know, we just picked it up from another
Well,
town,
that's
and
why-
we thought it was a good idea.
It's in the email that you sent.
We thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, it seemed like, really covers, it makes it clear to the
comprehensive.
vendors that they can't get away with
This makes
collusion.
nothing, the sentence, it can be included, but
Makes sense.
this isn't a statement to the vendors. It says, no Rock Hall council member or employee shall participate. So if we think we need to tell vendors not to let them participate, I don't know what kind of vendors we're expecting to respond.
Now, it's not participate in the website, it says in the authorization, approval, or award of the service of the contract.
But the
Right, so why
If
is that
there's
in
a
the
ben-
RFP?
if there's a beneficial interest, they have to step back.
But why is that in the RFP that's going out to the world?
I don't know, because that's what, we've seen it.
Okay.
And I don't see anything wrong with it.
As a
Well, then the RFP
courtesy,
can be,
they're
can
planning
be
to.
on, you
they
can put a
might
bunch of
say,
stuff in there.
Right, shouldn't be in an RFP. No, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Can I just be clear, so we can go on, our reason to recommend not including it was in no way to encourage conflicts of interest or collusion. Our point is, we have a conflict of interest policy, and we're gonna ask them to give us a statement of ownership interest. So when we see who owns these companies,
How do you know?
we should be able to ascertain whether there's a potential conflict of interest.
But how do you
You
know it's
all
not
are
somebody's
already-
cousin?
You all are already obligated to know when you should be recusing yourself or not being encouraged a company that you have some business interest in and doing business with the town. The language in this RFP isn't gonna police that any better.
I could be happy with striking that sentence, but not everything else before that.
What do you think, Brian?
So,
Well, I can see both points of view, but I think, I trust the town attorney that our conflict of interest, paragraph code will work.
Does it cover collusion or just conflict of interest?
There's a conflict of interest fairly well, which is.
We even looked at, I'm afraid I didn't bring my usual thick, folder of everything in the whole world that I usually bring to the meetings, but there was a draft RFP that Chestertown did in 2010 that we took a lot of language from it.
Yeah.
There was a form of this in that.
It's, again,
If Chestertown could do it, they must have felt it was important to, they're a small town and, I guess
Just
they.
because somebody else does it doesn't mean it's a good idea in this world. I disagree with a lot of things going on in this world. Just because other people do it doesn't mean we have to do it. I support this, but I do go ahead as Brian, I go for legal, and they say we don't need it in there, we are protected. I'm gonna have to support that.
Does Chestertown have a conflict of interest code too that they work under? Is that?
I'm not sure.
I guess
We
I
do.
just was
I'm not worried
comparing us
about
to
Chestertown.
another similar sized town is what I was trying to do, so.
It sounds like to me that this committee did a good job of putting this RFP together. We sent it to the town attorney to look it over and put all the legal ramifications on it, and I trust his opinion on this. And, I think you did a good job of putting the right language in. The wording could be used a little different, but I'm not a town attorney, so.
We only have one thing left if we want to get it over with. I think we should beat this dead horse.
The only issue here, the RFP suggested that there was a project completion time. And it's 120 days. In our view, the completion time is something that might ultimately get flushed out in the contract that you negotiate with the vendor you select, because there might be other considerations. But at the same time, we don't have any objection if it's important to put a time frame in there for project completion. We don't think the RFP is where you put penalty provisions for not meeting that time frame. That's something that'll be in the contract that you enter into, because it's something I think you would negotiate.
So the reason why we mentioned this one is because, one of the things we're asking for is a, estimated project timetable, including progress reports and completion dates. So we wanted to give the vendors a frame of reference of what, would be the ultimate, maximum amount of time
Right.
they could do it. I mean, they could do it faster. There was a section here about, in your version about, contracts, that'll be duly, the contract will be duly approved by the town council prior to becoming effective, shall include among other terms and conditions, blah, blah, blah. So, I guess I was sort of curious why it said renewal terms, but it didn't mention, vendor performance guarantees probably covers it, I guess. I mean, as a positive way of saying that if, that you need to get the job done. But I guess the reason why we suggested 120 days is because, we have a budget to be worried about. We're gonna be paying the other, we're gonna be paying for the current website, $833, $35 a month, until the new one is completed. So it is important to get it done in a speedy manner.
You can include a time frame, but you could have a vendor say we can do this in 2 months. You can have one say it's gonna take us 6 months. You can have one,
And that will
you
come
have
out of
to
the
be-
evaluation,
Correct,
yes.
so, but when you put a number,
Mhm.
sometimes that becomes the norm, as opposed to give us your best proposal, and you might be comparing one that says I can do it in 45 days, and others says I do it in 3 months, and for all the reasons you just said, well, let's get it done quicker. However, you're promising to do it pretty fast, so what are our protections if you don't get it done so fast, because we picked you because you said you could do it fast? And then we'll negotiate the penalties for not getting it done. So, again, this
Okay,
is,
so I mean, I
it's
guess
up
it's
to
good
you
to
all
bring
if you wanna put a
attention to
number.
this.
or-
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think you're right. I think it's sort of like saying, well, we have a budget of this much amount of money, right? Is you're saying you have a budget about this amount of time, and then they could take advantage of that. So I see your point.
I mean, in fact,
But
one of your
just people keep
criteria,
in mind
one
when
of
you
your,
have a contract.
one of your, I can't remember all the criteria you were gonna use to judge. One of them may be,
Timetable.
timetable to
Reasonable,
deliver.
whether it's reasonable, not whether it's fast or
Correct.
whatever, but that it's reasonable. So,
Right.
But, okay, that explains it. And I think, the performance guarantee part is mentioned in the, later in RFP, so that's covered, but.
Cora,
See, I'm not completely unreasonable. I think
Cora,
that's-
under the ethics, if there's, like use of prestige of their office for their own benefits, is that another? I mean, that could constitute collusion, or, using your confidential information, for their own benefit or another. I mean, that could pretty much fall
Yeah.
under the collusion. Accepting gifts, hold unacquired interest in a business that has a negotiating contract with the town. I don't know if it's in chapter 15 under ethics, of course.
So it's good that there are such rules. I guess I'm still sort of thinking, what about the vendor? They may not have,
Right.
these rules. They may not have knowledge of these rules, and, I guess, wouldn't it be good to refer to them or encapsulate them with this sort of language? Just to make it, it's pretty much like putting them on notice that, you can't do this, you can't collude. If you have, if you have family connections to town council, you can't take advantage of that. I don't know, I think it sends a strong signal, and however it's done, whether it's referring to existing rules, as you have all mentioned, or whether it's summarizing the essence of those rules, I still feel it's necessary.
I feel it's necessary to be upfront and put it in writing. Whatever you do, it has to be right on the RFP.
It's a way of thinking, and I think,
Can't be a footnote.
when it comes to the IT field, everybody is got that kind of very straightforward, everything's on the table kind of logic, I guess. Maybe that's where we're coming at it, but,
I can't think of any other good or service that the town would purchase that we wouldn't expect the same thing that we're gonna expect from website design firms.
right, which is, kind of goes to my point. If you're in the construction business, you're probably, quite familiar with this, the town's, rules. On the other hand, we've never had a bidding for a website. So, maybe it's important from the point of view of the vendors who, most of them have, you know, I mean, we've only ever had one vendor, so, I'm just trying to see this from the point of view of the vendors, and making sure we're, as Kate says, really upfront about all the rules, and I guess if those, if what the language we've suggested does not reflect our rules, then, you know, by all means, have it reflect our rules, but to not mention this to the vendors, that we're not gonna stand for any conflict of interest, we're not gonna stand for any collusion, you know, I mean, I guess I wanna take a tough line on that.
Right, and when they give us a quote, the quote's the quote.
I got a crazy idea. Why don't we go back and redraft our procurement legislation in the book so it reflects some of the things that has been discussed here, some of the things that we've heard throughout the year, and we can, I mean, you've already created a draft at one point in time that was presented to the then mayor and council. We have some fairly straightforward boilerplate language with respect to procurement. Why don't we in turn take, and what is we know is a set of legislation that just is, it's fairly loose, and tighten it up.
Well, but that, I mean,
It's a separate issue.
separate,
I
yeah,
agree with
that's absolutely, we could do that, but I think for this, I would recommend this. I don't think there's no like deal killer in any of these comments. I think what I would recommend is I could provide to the provisions where we've had a discussion about the best language, we can take a stab at drafting compromise language. I'll submit that to you all, and then that you all decide how you want to proceed with that.
Well,
okay?
I think clearly there's been a, Chip, I think what we've heard tonight is there seems to be, you know, a willingness to, you know, understand and respect each other's
Yeah.
position. So I would certainly say at this point, if you could in turn construct a draft
Right.
based on this conversation that's ensued, and then we'll come back and revisit it and go from there.
I mean, I've written them, I mean, we actually went through the email and wrote out the comments just so I could talk somewhat intelligently tonight, but we can convert this into written recommendations on these points.
Appreciate you
You know,
taking
we-
time, Ann.
I mean, for instance, we can come up with a very affirmative statement about conflicts of interest and all that, but we can do it in one sentence. Okay, so, I mean, if that's an important thing, that we send that message, that we can do that. It doesn't need this much, in my
I
opinion.
can tell you like to streamline things,
Yes.
so that's good for a lawyer, that's
Did
good.
you want them to meet you in your office?
Yeah,
Well-
we would,
Well, no, I don't think we have to even go that far. I can write up our recommendations and whoever, I mean, to you, the liaison, and if, to the extent you wanna pass them along, they can look at them and all that. But ultimately, this RFP ultimately is for you all to ultimately sign off on before it's published.
Yeah, and I think,
Right, so at some point, you'll get as much input as you can, and then you all have to be ready to say, okay, let's publish that.
and I think as we've engaged the conversation tonight, that being the council, and hearing certainly Coors and the committee's points that they brought forth, and with respect to the draft you put out there, I think it's good that we all have an opportunity now to see it, because, again, we've engaged this conversation tonight, so just keep us involved as now we go forward to the next level, which is another draft.
I have a question. I have kind of two issues here myself, that I've heard two things tonight. The RFP process that we don't have,
Don't have one.
the email issues that we do have. Are these two issues that we should really fix before? We're starting to get a lot of grants, a lot of projects, we have a new RFP process.
I think
Are
that
these
is,
two issues
well-
that we should get fixed and working on
well, when we
prior
did
to?
when we did this tennis court proposal initially, we required a lot of financials on the companies that put in their proposals. And one met it,
Right, I
the other
could-
one did
right,
not,
right.
and yet we accepted the other one as still as part of the conversation. So I think we really do need to pin down some procurement manner of process of how we in turn do our RFPs. I mean, just some good basic guidelines. I mean, after all, it's been on the books for a lot of years, and we have reached a point in time where it certainly does need updating.
Oh, I agree, you have no rules and policies and procedures for procurement.
Well, we have a draft that we can certainly begin to
Sure, you have
work
a
with.
draft ordinance, but that has, I mean, that can be a guide.
Well, that's, I mean, I think it's a
and all
good
that. But
foundation
this-
for what could be the new procurement
Right,
process.
but you
that
don't,
we
right,
can
but
move
you
out
don't need to wait to do all that before you release this.
No, we
I
don't.
think this, you're down to some modest wordsmithing, frankly. I
Well-
mean, the substance of this RFP is in good shape. I mean, there's just a little bit to do to get this ready.
And I think that was a
Well,
good
I guess
conversation tonight, but I think we have, what Susan points out, we have some grants coming down the pike, and we have some RFPs going out, we have a
We have a
budget,
lot of
which,
progress going on, and then we just heard these big issues on these email problems that they're not receiving,
So that's
you
gonna
know.
require a
Can
vendor.
I talk about the email thing for a second?
But we
I wanna
have-
channel William about this, because the problems you're having are so easy to fix. You just need to lean on CBIA a little bit more to fix them. I know you applied for rockwellmaryland.gov, and if, you may or may not want to start using that email address as soon as possible, depending on a lot of things. One thing that we thought would be good to do would be to install an easier email system along the same time that you change your email address. So, you know, but again, that's between you and CBIA, and you need to get your money's worth and get that taken care of, but it could be taken care of in a day or two if you really push hard enough.
but for the .gov domain, wasn't that they told of us it was gonna take a little longer?
Yeah, so it's gonna take a while, it may or may not happen before the vendor is selected, which is why it may make more sense to do them, you know, switch to the email system at the same time as the new, you know, as the new website is launched, or do it as soon as you selected the vendor, and then the website comes later. But this rockwellmaryland.com email situation can also be fixed within a couple of days if you just if you really make it clear to the vendor, something needs to be done. I mean, the town clerk at rockwellmaryland.com, email address is right there on the webpage, as if it were like the main point of contact, and yet nobody's accessing that email. That to me is the worst.
Oh,
Because,
I want to tell you, I used that once to try to reach her. I was out of town, and I was delayed coming back, and I wanted to reach her about my water bill.
Yeah.
And I emailed her, and she never emailed me back.
It's not her
Finally, when I got
fault.
back, I said, did you get my email?
It's not even her fault, you know, and it just seems like, I know that the email system he's using apparently is not very popular. Maybe you can lean on him to change that. You know, you're paying him $835 a month. Surely you could get him to come up with a better email system that everybody can use more easily. But in the meantime, just for the next couple of days, you've just gotta get that town clerk at rockwellmaryland.com fixed so that it either forwards to Stephanie's other Rockwell Maryland address, or she has access to it or something. But that shouldn't take a whole lot of
5
time.
minutes.
And that's why I'm trying to channel William, except I'm not doing so, because he's always so big and calm and, you know, authoritative about it. But if he were here, he'd be like, just give me access, I'll fix it, you know. I mean, you know, it's simple stuff.
It is easy,
Okay, all right.
very easy.
We'll certainly address that.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention, I know that, we proposed a timeline, and, I really hope we could get started, but it would require moving forward at the next town council meeting, after the new changes, after his revised version comes to you. But in the meantime, it's still really important to make sure that the draft RFP does not get into the wrong hands. So I don't know what is going to be done, how that's going to be handled. You know, we've tried very hard to make sure that that doesn't happen, because if it did, there could be grounds for, you know, invalidating the whole process.
No,
So
I
I would like
think-
to hear assurances from the town council that you were going to do something to make sure that that website RFP, the draft version, which isn't even finalized yet, doesn't get into the hands of the media or in the hands of anybody who would leak it to a vendor.
I think we've all heard the sensitivity of that, and I think that's something that we're gonna.
You hear that?
He's fine.
All right, so, Horace? Pardon?
He was laughing at me, sorry.
Oh.
I was teasing back.
No, he's fine. I think it's the other one we need to worry out.
Okay, so any other questions of the council?
So,
or
I didn't
vice
mean to
versa?
interrupt you, you said you were taking all the
No,
necessary
no,
steps
No, I
to-
think all of the board has certainly, you know, we recognize the importance of that.
So, I mean, in terms of the copies that were distributed tonight, are you holding on to them, or are you giving them back to the town
I
to get
would
a
like
revised
to,
version?
I mean, I think that we are the elected officials, and I think that's something that we have to, at some point, we can handle this, we're big boys and girls. Thank you.
No interviews with the media.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Cora.
You okay with that?
Yep.
Now, let's,
Chip will get us.
So, yeah, before the end of the week, we'll have, our, proposed revisions and tweaking, and I'll get those directly to you, Brian, and then let you disseminate if you see fit as a liaison.
Yeah, because again, as we're engaged in this, I want to be able to have the ability to think this thing through as we go forward and not think it through within, okay, here it is, now you've got to make your
Right, just
response.
saying.
It's just, you can't operate like that.
You can
All right.
operate
Well, we'll
within
have it by the
2
end of the
months.
week, and I'll notify you